we're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in the Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot. But we're working closely with Europe and our partners to develop a long-term strategy to reduce their dependence on Russian energy as well. Our teams are actively discussing how to make this happen, and today we remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. Look, let me be clear about two other points. First, it's simply not true that my administration or policies are holding back domestic energy production. That's simply not true. Even amid the pandemic, companies in the United States pumped more oil during my first year in office than they did during my predecessor's first year. We're approaching a record levels of oil and gas production in the United States, and we're on track to set a record oil production next year. In the United States, 90% of onshore oil production takes place on land that isn't owned by the federal government. And of the remaining 10% that occurs on federal land, the oil and gas industry has millions of acres leased. They have 9,000 permits to drill now. They could be drilling right now, yesterday, last week, last year. They have 9,000 to drill onshore that are already approved. So let me be clear. Let me be clear. They are not using them for production now. That's their decision. These are the facts. We should be honest about the facts.
Finally, prior to this move by the Biden administration, the U.S. had exempted Russian energy from any sanctions, meaning that we were still funding a country that was in turn using that funding as part of its invasion against a sovereign country. That ends today. However, let's be clear-eyed about what this will mean. It'll mean that oil prices will go up. Gas prices are already at an all-time high, but unfortunately the choice here is binary. Either we refuse to sanction Russian oil and continue to fund their war against Ukraine, or we starve Russia's economy with these sanctions and take a stand for democracy. Neither comes without consequences. And yet still 71% of Americans support a ban on Russian oil, even if it means higher gas prices. And that includes 82% of Democrats, 70% of independents, and 66% of Republicans. Vast majorities across the board. Which, so that we're clear, is a good thing. If the choice is between deferring to lower gas prices at all costs, or taking a hit to defend democracy, then there's no question. Higher prices will hurt. I get it, and I'm not at all trying to pretend that that pain doesn't exist, but we're also not the ones hiding in bomb shelters. And yet, despite this surprising consensus, still that hasn't stopped Republicans, who are quick to call for sanctions on Russia, to then turn around and in the same breath condemn the Biden administration for high gas prices. Just take a look at these tweets from the Republican Party, Republican senators, Republican lawmakers, and even right-wing provocateurs. The same party that absolved Trump of wrongdoing for withholding military aid to Ukraine is now suddenly in full support of cutting off Russian oil to help Ukraine, except they also want to be able to criticize Biden for the impacts of helping Ukraine. Yeah, no, that totally checks out. Here are some facts about oil production. Oil production in the US fell during 2020 because of the pandemic. There was more supply than demand, so oil companies cut production. As the country opened back up in 2021 and beyond, demand surged. However, that supply was still constrained, which drove prices up. And beyond that, oil companies weren't super eager to maximize supply, given that they could then benefit financially from that high demand, and they did. Last year alone, oil companies profited $174 billion, with a B, with Exxon, Chevron, Shell, and BP seeing some of their highest profits in years. So if you're looking for the culprit for high gas prices, maybe just maybe, start with the guys who so plainly profited from those high prices. Here's a hint, it ain't Biden. That is to say, there's very little the president can do to change oil prices. He can, for example, release oil from our strategic petroleum reserves, which Biden did only days ago to the tune of 30 million barrels of oil. That can mitigate some impact, but it's only a stopgap measure. A president can also negotiate deals with other countries to help mitigate the impacts. Like, for example, when Donald Trump helped negotiate a deal between Russia and Saudi Arabia in 2020 to slash 9.7 million barrels a day, or 10% of the world's output, because oil prices were falling. That's right, the Republican deity helped coordinate a deal to help those poor oil companies who were struggling with collapsing prices. And what happened? The next day, oil prices skyrocketed 24% for the best day on record as a result of that agreement. So I guess presidents can have some impact on oil prices if they're operating on Russia's behalf. The simple fact is that oil prices are going to go up because Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine. They're going to go up for the entire world. Biden made the right call by banning all imports of Russian oil. Not only because we have no business funding their war machine, but also because we should not be dependent on an adversary for gas at home. And yes, it's going to send gas prices higher doing it this way in one fell swoop, but this was the only option. And I'd much rather have a president who's honest about this than one who traffics in make-believe to make himself look better. In the meantime, if you weren't on board with renewables, maybe now would be a good time to take a long, hard look at what our reliance on fossil fuels does to us. Whether it's getting us involved in wars in the Middle East to conflicts in Russia, so much of our history has been stained by our reliance on oil. All this does is underscore the absolute need to transition to renewables, energy that is cleaner, cheaper, and that we could produce at home. Enough propping up tyrants like Mohammed bin Salman and Vladimir Putin. Enough sending American kids to die in foreign oil fields. If this isn't the wake-up call we need to focus seriously and heavily on transitioning to renewables, then you haven't been paying attention. To see more videos like this, make sure to follow and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I cover the top stories each week and interview top political figures, including Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and so many more. So give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.